Are you telling your customer that they need to be moving their budget into GEO, or do you stand by like the SEO budget is the GEO budget? Do you feel them as different marketing budgets, or do you think they're the same?
I think it depends on what kind of retainer we have. We have some legacy clients that the effort and level to do some of this off-page stuff, not only is it more resource and driven, and it also is different personnel. Like someone running a PR branding campaign for me is not someone who's doing on-page, content strategy and analysis.
If you're planning on being in business for more than a year, you should spend money on SEO, GEO, get yourself optimized. If you need to raise money before the end of the year, you're done. SEO is not for you. Like, spend money on ads, spend money on emails, gotta go. So there's a lot of dimensions about how to choose your budget.
All right, welcome to another episode of SEO On-Air. I'm your host, Koa Kauwe, and this is brought to you by Stan Ventures. Today, we have two agencies on with us, two agency owners, that is, Jeff and Andrew. We're going to dive into what has made them successful as agency owners, maybe get a few of their views as to recommendations they might have for other agencies that are trying to get their feet wet in this agency world, and get a perspective on how they've adapted for AI use in today's marketing world as well. So to start, I want to give you each a chance to introduce yourselves, give us a little background on who you are and a view into what makes your agency successful. And then we'll move into some of the questions. We just want to have the viewers have an understanding of who you guys are to start. So starting with Andrew, give us a quick view of who you are and your agency.
Yeah, hey Koa, good to be here. I'm Andrew Seidman. I'm the co-founder and COO at Digital Reach. We are a end-to-end go-to-market pipeline generation agency for primarily B2B technology and SaaS companies, mostly like mid to large tech companies at this point. And based in New York. I think what makes us special is we realized at some point, kind of organically, that driving pipeline is only as effective as the weakest link in the go-to-market, which is to say, like, if you have an awesome advertising strategist who makes great ads and really knows how to manage budgets and that kind of thing, but the landing pages suck, or you can't run reports because the data's no good, or your sales team drops the leads on the ground because no one was there to pick them up, or even above all that, like if your brand message isn't aligned with the market, like if you're just off base or misdirectioned, it doesn't work. And so we realized that, okay, if we actually want to solve our client's core problem, which is getting pipeline, we had to do it with a relatively wide brush and kind of understand the different interconnectednesses and nuances of how to actually drive pipeline. So I think that's our approach. It's more nuanced and less like cookie cutter than a lot of folks, but we're excited about it.
I think that's great. I think that we've seen a trend recently with agencies where they're definitely tracking more of like the revenue conversion instead of just the lead. So I think you're ahead of the game on that. I like it. Jeff, your turn, man. Give us a quick view of your world.
Yeah, thanks, Go, for having me. Jeff Carrier, founder of Restoration Digital Marketing. We are a local SEO boutique agency for disaster restoration companies. So we're hyper niche specific. I was in that industry for quite some time, but a background in marketing. So that's how it kind of got started. And so one of our value props is being able to be able to replicate our process from city to city for these restoration companies that are typically non-tech savvy, not too educated, not too understanding, and not be able to actually articulate the correct things to a normal agency. So we're from this specific industry and niche, we're actually able to kind of understand exactly where they're at and what they need to do without them kind of educating us, because this is we stayed in one specific lane per se.
Yeah, I can appreciate that too. That's been a big thing on the podcast where people are trying to lock down a certain industry because they really want to be experts in that specific niche. So I can appreciate that. I'm going to dive into that a little bit further. And Andrew, I'm going to have you answer a similar question here. We want to start with just understanding, I don't want to say what made you feel like you were crazy enough to start your own agency, right? But what gave you the confidence to go out and build an agency? Both of you founded these agencies, or at least co-founded it in your situation, Andrew. Tell us a little bit about what made you think you could be successful in this, because a lot of people are in that in between phase where they're like, "Hey, I think I have the knowledge. I think I have the know-how. Can I go out and do this?" Give us a view of what made you guys get started. I'm opening the question up to either one of you guys too, so I'll just throw it out.
Well, I think mine is probably a little bit easier than maybe some others that maybe have to make the jump from, say, a full-time gig into the reality in the world of kind of starting them on their own and having to go find clients. Like I was given the opportunity to basically one, have proven everything successfully at a registration company. So I was running sales and marketing at a registration company. So everything that I was doing for me was proof of concept that I knew how to do this for others. And that allowed me to kind of start this in-house at the registration company until I was able to step away from having kind of built up the clientele. And so I have I feel like it's a little bit of a transition process there, but the fact that I was able to be at the type of organization executing and succeeding was kind of my gateway of like allowing me to do that.
So you were building the business up as you had your full-time job, so that when you had the time to step away, or I guess when you made the decision to step away, you had that already established.
Exactly. And the fact that I would be only targeting the exact type of companies that I was already finding success in, that was one of the things that gave me confidence in doing so.
I want to ask one more question before I let you take that, Andrew. Have you stepped outside of that industry at all? And what was your experience going into like a different one, if you have?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a lot of clients that say they have a carpet cleaning company or they have a roofing company, and we have some of those right now, like onesie twosies. And I'd say I haven't stepped outside of that local SEO world really. But I have stepped outside of the vertical in the industry of restoration, just not outside of really the local SEO world.
Awesome. Andrew, yeah. What's your perspective of getting started? Tell me your story.
Yeah, I think I got really good advice once upon a time from a really successful entrepreneur who said, "Don't try to build technology or scale things until you've done things the like dirty, manual, gritty way. Like if you can't sell it from whatever you're doing, like in a spreadsheet somewhere, then don't try to like layer a bunch of stuff on top of it." And I think I didn't really understand that at the time, but looking back, I started just part time. I was doing this on the side. My friends had sort of been one of my friends, one of my co-founders was like kind of working, had worked at an agency in the past and had learned a bunch of things. And it was kind of like left that agency. He was going to start his own thing. It was kind of like just hustling as like a solopreneur kind of thing. And so I saw that one of my friends and another friend kind of joined him. I saw they got a little bit of traction. Like they were like, whatever it was they were doing was like hustling their way into some amount of money. Not a huge amount of money, but like, like $1,000 a month, something like that. And I was like, how my ears perked up a little bit. And I was like, oh, like there's a little bit of traction happening with whatever they're doing. I want to go like get my fingers involved in this thing. My friends would call it like a nose for arbitrage. Like there's a little market opening and like, I'm going to go see what's up with it. So I don't think I have any big like aspirations of like, oh, I'm going to go start a big agency. I think I was kind of just like poking around with what my friends were working on. And then I think once I got myself kind of initiated, I was like, oh, there actually might be more depth to this market than I thought. And then one thing after another happens, and before you know it, you're like, well, you have a little bit more work to do. You have a little bit more work to do. Like some clients referred you. You got a little bit more happening. And it's like, okay, well, I was part time, but like maybe we should do this thing full time. And then, and so I think it was pretty organic in how it happened. But I also I think in some ways similar to Jeff, like I had my previous life before getting into marketing was I was a professional poker player for many, many years and like lived like a pretty high risk, generally independent life. And so the idea, like I was still playing a little bit of poker on the side. So like the idea of like, oh, I'm going to do something a little bit risky never even crossed my mind, to be honest. It was just kind of like, we do risky things. That's what we do.
I think it's funny. A lot of people compare their digital marketing agencies to like a game. They get to optimize every little part of it and just have fun playing, like pulling all these little levers until they find out what works.
All a game, man. Like this game, I just happen to think this game is a lot more complicated and interesting than playing cards.
I'll add Koa too, because I think one of the things before we started recording, you had mentioned like there could be a lot of agency owners or people kind of starting out or trying to get past the 2 to 5 client range. And I think, and I don't know where Andrew was when he first started, but I think it's natural for a lot of agency people, especially if you're talking to different clients who might say, hey, I need this service, or I might need that service. And then you have kind of like a wide breadth of quote unquote digital marketing services, or, Andrew specific on go-to-market and that funnel. But, I think if I were to go back, I would probably tighten that up a lot quicker than I did in terms of different types of services. So that way I am really structured on what my core competencies are, the one that I enjoy doing, and two that I feel like is my largest strengths. And that way that it gets communicated better when I'm on these calls, when I'm doing my outreach, so on and so forth, right? And so that's I think early on until you can get to a better way of bringing on better talent that can handle hyper specific things or different things. It would be something that, I'd add on there that I might change at the beginning.
I love that, thinking about your customers too. Like every time a customer comes to you, you're like, okay, but what do you really do? What are we really trying to market for? Like really finding what your really revenue generating opportunities are. You're actually right in line with one of the first questions, I guess my second question that I wanted to ask, which was thinking back to like getting your agency off the ground. What was the hardest thing that didn't show up in your business plan? And what would you tell someone else that's just starting out to prepare them for the reality of running this digital marketing business? And I think what you're saying aligns with that well. There's like that reality to don't try to do everything, right? Like find what you're good at and lock that down. What else would you guys have as basic advice that probably doesn't show up when they, ask ChatGPT to give them the framework for opening an agency, but the reality is of running an agency?
Well, I guess I would say, if I just jump in, that you're going to put your name down as credit a lot, and you're going to need to be building a lot of trust with like real people. I think sometimes when you think about making a business, you think about an abstract way, like, and then I'll get all these clients as though they're just like logos and checks in your account and so forth. But like they're people, and their only reason they're going to work with you fundamentally is because they trust you. And they're only going to trust you if someone told them to trust you, generally speaking, and that's because that person's had a good experience, like knows you're trustworthy and all that kind of thing. And so I think folks often get in this like abstract world of like I'm gonna like crunch numbers on a spreadsheet, whereas like it's really about like building, I think, very human relationships. And in that regard, what I would say is similar to what sounds like Jeff has done. When you get traction, it is really good to then just like go deep in your lane of traction, like as narrow and deep as you can get, generally speaking, as opposed to as broad. We actually probably made this mistake. Like we went pretty broad at the beginning in trying to do things for all kinds of different types of companies, for example. And in actuality, like we really needed to build core expertise, a tighter brand, and find it easier to sell when people find you that are like, oh, this is exactly the right agency for us, as opposed to like, oh, this is an agency that kind of like works with B2C and with B2B, and they do with social media, and they do like search, and they do, like everything under the sun that you can think of. Like you're better off generally being like, we serve B2B technology companies, Series C or above. You know what I mean? Like even that is too wide. Like we're now doing like we're serving B2B technology companies, Series C and above in AI and cybersecurity. Like that's like our niche that we are getting into. And I think a lot of folks, they don't have that kind of focus on traction or on relationships and brand.
I want to ask the question along that. We hear that pretty often, like try to find what you're good at and focus on it. I want to expand that a bit. And I think your comment about relationships makes me want to expand it further. But like, why is it so important to just keep driving down that lane that you're on, that you're seeing some success on? Help me understand why that's so effective.
Well, I Andrew kind of reiterated even further on my description of being in the registration industry. But as soon as Andrew, because I have another like SaaS company, as soon as Andrew described exactly where his focus was, that he's been able to identify and lean into, it immediately made me understand a lot quicker of, is this a potential good fit for me, knowing what my industry and my company is, right? And so now that he's really narrowing this in, he can have more and more conversations and also have more prior experiences, case studies, client examples that he can point to, and that works really well. Because a lot of times, like these people have said to me a lot of times, like, is the registration industry enough to make good money? And I'm like, 100%. Like people don't even know this industry, and I'm just like hyper focused on it. And there's just more than enough money to at least get to a lot further than people want. And to Andrew's point about relationships in terms of putting your name on credit, it couldn't be any more true. And it's one of the things that you're going to manage and try and get really good at. But also with scaling, then you have like, your project managers or account managers kind of managing that reputation for you as well, which is, another really interesting thing. I always like to think, like, if I lose a client and they haven't at least come to me first for whatever reason, something's not working right or whatnot, then obviously we did not have the relationship that we should have had, because that's what having the relationship also helps buy you the time to figure out what is or isn't working. It allows you to enhance that quality of that client relationship and your campaign with them to the next level, because they are communicating with you. They're being transparent because you have that relationship. If you don't have that relationship, that's when you get that email out of the blue, and you could be surprised, and that tells you just you didn't have the relationship that you thought you had.
Yeah, as you guys were talking about that relationship aspect, I think about like the client, from the client perspective, and you guys like really locking down what you're good at and having them be able to see it. I think of it almost like a doctor's office. Like I could go to a general practice doctor, or I could go to like a cardiologist if I just had a heart attack, right? And like if I feel like someone really understands what I'm personally going after, I'm trusting that person to have the right answer for me. With so many agencies out there, I think that there's like the view for the customer is like, who the heck do I trust? And the last person I talked to, I didn't trust at all. And you guys are kind of connecting like, hey, we do restoration in your situation, or even like the B2B side of things, which is not every agency. Software as a service is definitely not every agency's like strength. So you guys are kind of locking down that you understand them. And then Andrew, I think of even the poker background, like reading people being a strength of yours. I think of that being like a really cool way for you to understand what your customers are really looking for. But I'm going to transition this into my next question as I share those thoughts. The next question is, as agencies start to reach that point where they start to scale, there's aspects of the business that tend to take a hit. And one of those might be like Jeff and Andrew really understood their customer. And now they don't touch the customer after the initial sales thing. Maybe there's account managers, maybe there's some other people that have joined the company that are selling rather than just the two of you guys. So you start to lose some stuff. What would you coach other agencies to be aware of as they start to scale, that you would even encourage them to hang on to certain practices before they scale to make sure that they maintain a level of quality or control, or even just to rephrase that, what have you sacrificed in scaling that you might warn other agencies to be cautious of?
I think I'll use my favorite analogy on this, which is like you're building a bridge, but because you're underfunded and you're not that experienced, you're just building the best bridge you can with the amount of time and money that you have. And so there's going to be cracks. Um, And when you got one car driving over the bridge per day, not a big deal. Cracks not really going that anywhere. You can also just kind of personally manage it. Like you kind of see what's going on. When you get 10,000 cars driving over the bridge every day, it's like, oh, one little crack could be fatal, or it could be like really, really bad, and it can spread and all these things. And so it's not that you'll be able to avoid having cracks in your bridge when you're scaling. Like there will be. Like you're not going to be the experience, even no matter how many people you talk to, books you read, whatever. You're going to have those kinds of things. But I think going back to the previous question about like having depth of purpose, clarity of purpose, like what you want is something that is deeply repeatable. The smaller the surface area of areas for cracks in the bridge, so to speak, like the fewer opportunities there are for that to show up, the easier the scaling process is going to be. So like, for example, if I offer a bunch of services, which we do, it's really difficult to get like everyone on the team to understand kind of how these different services interact, what the expectations are, how we talk about them, and so on and so forth. If you do like one thing really well, it's a lot easier to make sure like, oh, everybody gets trained on this one thing. Everyone's kind of aligned on how this one thing is going to work. And so the talk track is really clear. The team is really focused. They get really good at what they do. To what Jeff said, like you get case studies and these kinds of things, but more importantly, like you just talk about it in the way that your customer is used to hearing about it. Like I would never be able to talk about Jeff's business. Like if I started trying to sell to Jeff's customers, they would be like, this guy's never done this work in his life. He's using all the wrong words in all the wrong places. Like it would be a disaster. But I would assume on the same side of it that if I walked into some tech company's boardroom, like Jeff might have a hard time like finding the right words to use to qualify himself. Whereas like that's like what we do. Um, so I think there's some benefit to scaling by keeping your surface area more narrow and sort of like digging in. The only caveat I'll give to this is like that whole thing I said about finding traction and digging deep into it. Like sometimes it's really tricky. Like you might have traction in like 3 or 4 different spaces. Like maybe Jeff had the option to be an SEO agency or web development agency in his area, or also maybe like a advertising agency in his area, or like whatever it is. Or maybe bigger companies or smaller companies, or maybe outside the geo or like super local to the geo, or like there might be traction in a bunch of ways there. And it's difficult to know, well, which one should I really focus on? So I kind of get why people end up in this. But in any case, all that to say, I think the best ways you can help yourself in scaling, from a philosophical level, have a narrower aperture, like a smaller focus so that you don't have as much stuff to redo every time. And I think from like a really tactical perspective, getting the right tools. Like we embedded pretty early in Asana. Asana is like a project management tool that instrumental to scaling and to organizing information. And we did it pretty poorly. We were again not experienced builders, but like we kind of just did our best with this tool, and it was provided in a crazy amount of value in scaling. So I think philosophy is probably the most important, but there's also like a bunch of tools like that are just like, wow, if you get this tool locked in, it really does help a lot. Even just like getting G Suite set up and having a Google Drive and having like those other things like super important to like help you scale properly.
The bridge analogy is actually really fascinating. It's not one I think I've heard before, because I think a lot of companies would be making the mistake of trying to build one amazing bridge and starting on one side of the water and never actually getting that full beautiful bridge built to the other side. They just never had anyone cross the bridge. They built it all and watched it just sit there and rot.
That's what my first thing was, like get some traction first. You know what I mean? Like once you've got some people lining up in their cars waiting to go across, like it's like, okay, we should build a bridge, as opposed to like, let's just build a bridge and hope people want to drive here. So yeah, starting with traction is helpful.
Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Andrew, explained that quite well, and having kind of your narrow moat definitely helps with the repeatability. So that's a huge one. And as you scale, you're going to have to relinquish certain responsibilities, right? So thinking about the ones that you least love to do, the ones that you shouldn't be doing. Like, I don't know how many times I talked to someone and they're like doing like bookkeeping services. I'm like, dude, get rid of that. That's not worth your time. Your dollar per hour is way better spent doing all sorts of other things that you're clearly an expert in, right? So get those things off your plate if you're feeling like one of those solo entrepreneurs that is tackling everything. That's a great book for that is like Who Not How. Highly recommend. And so as you scale, you'll offload the easy stuff, and then you'll have to get to the point where that everyone faces is like not everyone's gonna be able to do it as good as you, and getting really comfortable and understanding that and like how to manage that. It becomes a great skill in itself of just like, okay, I got a project manager. They're now talking to my client every month. Do I go from 100, where I do all the monthly meetings, to 0? How do I step that down? How do I monitor that? How do I make sure we're still enabling the relationship, with myself / the new person that clearly needs to be taking responsibility and managing that going forward. And so figuring out that skill of being comfortable of relinquishing certain things is man, that's something that I'm sure a lot of people work on for a very long time.
Yeah, that hiring the right person is definitely like part of that, right? I think both of you sound like you had that experience. One thing that I want to ask now is not just hiring the right person. There's a part of this that's like you have to have had the confidence to know that you could even hire the right person. At what point did you feel like your agency, you realize like, hey, we're making this. What's the next step towards scaling and success? Like, when did you decide that you had done enough that you were ready to expand this?
Say mine starts around when you just start realizing that like the amount of client workload you have is taking up too much of my week, right? And then that's preventing me from staying ahead of the curve, doing more sales, onboarding new people. And you just have to there's definitely that switching spot, at least in my type of agency with local SEO. It's like, okay, when do I bring on this next person? Is it part-time then full-time? Is it straight to full-time? So that way I got enough confidence on the inbound. Having good inbound is helpful because it gives you that confidence of, okay, the next 2-3 months, you just project out the finances as long as the inbound keeps happening, and you're training them on your core specialty, right? If you've narrowed down enough and like website development and SEO is like your core, then you're able to like train and educate them and oversee them a lot more efficiently too.
Yeah, I would just add that I think it often is super organic. Like it's like somebody wants to pay you for something that you don't really do very well yourself, or like that you have been doing and you know it's not that hard, and you would be happy to like pay someone else and show them what to do. It's like I think finding our early people, we literally just reached out to people we went to high school with, which had a very immediate impact of just like we brought on people that already knew us. There was social trust and social bonds, and we just like hired some people we had grown up with. Led to some problems further down the road when it was like, oh, we have like a very homogenous leadership team that all just like went to high school together. Not to mention like all the weirdness of like high school relationships as opposed to like relationships you form when you're an adult. But no, I think it's pretty organic. I think it's actually become as we've grown, it's kind of wild how much it becomes a really critical feature. And I would say like a ton of my job changed from like strategy or client services or even like operations into like leadership and personnel. Like a lot of it was just about finding the right person is a bit of a misnomer. Like most people could be the right person. Like they just are they in the right series of systems that work for them? Like do the values align really well? Like my values, for example, are not gonna be that crazy. Like there are a lot of people in the world that resonate with my values, but like trying to find people with the right motivation and the right kind of systems orientation and so forth is really tricky. And so
Doesn't show up on a resume situation, right?
not at all. I'm like basically just been like meeting as many of our candidates in person as I can now, like get on airplanes or getting them on airplanes or just like trying to meet with folks whenever possible. Because a lot of it, again, is that same relationship building thing. Same with clients, same with people. Like you're just trying to build trust on all sides of it. But yeah, it's tricky, man.
So you hired the right people. The agency's grown. You guys are feeling pretty good about yourselves. You guys, I think neither of you are lacking the confidence, which is kind of fun. A lot of people like they're not sure when they felt like they made it or if they've ever felt like that. Feels like you guys have that confidence to know you're doing a good thing. Then comes early 2025 and AI really hits, I think, the marketing world in a unique way. And everyone starts screaming the annoying words that you hear, which is SEO is dead and AI is going to take over everyone's jobs. I remember someone asked me the question like, hey, are you concerned at all about AI and like what it's going to do to your industry? And I felt like I was in a very weird position where if I say, yes, I'm concerned, I kind of lack the confidence that my industry is valuable. And if I say, no, I'm not concerned, I look like I'm ignorant to the changes that are happening in the industry and I should be more aware of them. With you guys, AI came through and a lot of people started questioning agencies and whether or not they were really going to be needed because a lot of the digital marketing world was going to change. So when it did first launch, I guess, and when you first felt that launch, when it became unavoidable, what assumptions did you have about the marketing world that kind of broke? Like what did it change for you? And then on the other side of that, how has it changed how you guys are operating today? Like what did you learn from those fears of like AI? Or maybe fears is the wrong word, but what did you learn and what did you change in your company to make sure that you're ahead of the game or at least part of the growth that's coming?
I can start. Yeah, I mean, I don't think fear for me was definitely a word I would use. I was paying attention. I was also embracing it. So, I was trying to see what made sense, what didn't. I don't know how long ago, but, this was started as like a blog writing tool or, something even smaller than that. And obviously it keeps evolving. And then you have more of like where AI search, I think for the first year wasn't really a thing. It was more of like, how do you get more services done inside your agency with using AI or not using AI? Or will Google rank AI written content, right? And people spinning this up. And we were pretty much on the sidelines for the most part. We were utilizing it for certain things or again, monitoring it, but we weren't selling any sort of AI written blog content versus manual written content, right? We just kind of did what we thought was the best for our clients. And
that's a pretty powerful statement with everything that was going on is you're filtering it out for what was best for the client. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And, I'd say because this thing keeps changing and is evolving, that as I kept on learning more, attended some recent conferences that I thought was quite insightful in terms of how the LLM is working. Obviously, with the increase in search, it to me, and then with the increase of Gemini being put at the top of Google. I mean, like now think about it. You got an AI overview that's like depending on what your vertical and category is, right? Like Andrew's is different than my local search. So we're going to have different SERPs and search engine results. So, but the AI overview in Gemini is like literally at the top of Google. It's like could be on top of an ad placement for crying out loud. So this is now becoming a lot more important. And from our perspective, we finally have devised and got a better understanding of the answer chain and how the prompts are done and query fan out strategies. And we're starting to get into solutions to address those items, right? And so I actually was just on a call this morning with a client, and I illustrated one example that was kind of like, for me, one, the Gemini being at the top of Google. Like, so even if people aren't searching in AI like GPT, if they go to Google, it's AI. Like it's just AI. The Gemini is just right there for you. The other thing is like Google paid a lot of attention to links. So if I went out and got some sort of random placement on, a news, a publication of sorts with the news, but they only said our name and there was no link, right? And it wasn't a do follow link. Google didn't really pay attention to that. Well, AI is. AI is paying attention to the brand mention. And so there's a clear distinction and difference right there. So
Yeah, I think on from my side of it, from a macro level, if you're not, afraid in some way, you're not like understanding what's happening. Now, it's a double-edged sword.
Healthy
Like it can
fear.
be great. Yeah, it could be great. But like the way the framing that I use for it is about AI's ability to tackle context. So like tic-tac-toe is a lower context game than chess. It was much easier for the robots to beat tic-tac-toe, figure it out, than to figure out chess, but they did. And then they expanded to figure out much more complicated games like Go or poker even. And so the trend is that these computers get better at tackling higher and higher context things over time. And LLMs are like the latest iteration of like higher context, like literally written conversation. They can understand and engage in all these things. That said, a lot of the stuff that we end up doing in marketing ends up being quite high context and very abstract, which is to say, like, helping somebody decide if their brand has product market fit or is like the right brand message for who they are as a person, as a leader, as a company, etc., is still very difficult for like AI to do. Even like designing an image, like designing like the right image for what you're trying to do, like that question of like what are you trying to do is still very difficult for an AI to grasp. Once it gets like a lot of the instructions as to like this is what it's really supposed to be and so forth, it gets once you add the context yourself, it gets better at doing it. But often a lot of the work we're doing is still too strategic and too high context on a macro level to like really AIify. But I will say that that's not absolute. And one good example of this is we build websites, and sometimes those websites we use we're partners with Webflow, which is good, the kind of CMS tool. And we found, and our designers design in Figma. So like they make Figma designs, they pass them to our web development team, who then turns them into code, and then we have a site. Um, there's a tool we found called Reloom that just basically converts Figma designs into CSS. And so the web development role became largely fixing the bugs that were created by the LLM in the transmit and like transmitting that design into code. But really, really much faster, much cheaper, much easier way of producing the same result. And I think that is like one of those things like, oh, actually converting this thing into CSS is a relatively low context thing. Like once you see it, you're kind of like going about, your marching orders of doing those things. There's deeper depth to like strategy and web development. So it wasn't like we didn't need web developers anymore. Like we still needed a web developer to go in and make good strategic decisions. Like why should this function work this way and not that way and so forth. But when it came to like slogging through the code, the AI did it. So I think that is a microcosm of where it's going. I think almost all of the work will be going higher and higher up the context tree over time. But that's also super empowering because that means that as an individual agency starter or entrepreneur or whatever it is, the future looks like a world where you have all of these really capable high context workers, agents, that you could be like, I want to design a website, and they probably will be able to then create you a really good design in Figma, and then will be able to translate that into Webflow and like build the CSS and so forth. So double-edged sword for sure. Robots might kill all of us, definitely, but
I think that's a
but I
really
think in
interesting
the
perspective again. Like
near term, it's pretty good.
when you mentioned something earlier about like the operations side of things, where you sometimes just have to go and build, you just have to go and do something, and then figure out how to like make it structurally sound. Maybe paraphrasing that poorly, but it made it sound like you have to just do it, and then maybe build it all into a sheet later, and you've already established the business. Like you can just go and do things. With AI, marketing agencies just go and do something, and then they figure out how to utilize AI to repeatedly do that something, and they build each step out like you've kind of mentioned, to make it really good at replicating a good strategy. And then it learns, and someone else adopts a similar strategy. And what makes an agency successful today is that really, really high context, which is continuously optimizing that strategy to be one step ahead of your competition. It sounds so novel when you say like AI is doing this amazing thing, but in reality, that's how agencies have really existed since agencies came to pass, right? Like it's all about there may be 10 different restoration companies that are competing with each other. So you're making your one company stand out in one unique way that others aren't doing it there. And that's, I don't know if I find this conversation fun because I think of the clients and trying to figure out who to work with. And it's so hard for them to understand that until they really get deep into the conversation and they see that someone is thinking just a step ahead of where they've been. And then they relinquish power and they're like, okay, you know what you're doing. Let's go for this. And I think that's like the fun thing that AI is empowering you to spend less time just trudging through the workload. Like instead of like being stuck doing the same task over and over and over again, you're leveraging AI and now you're utilizing yourself for the strategic changes to make yourself stand out from the competition. That's where I feel like it's in a really cool place. Now, I am curious, as all these changes come to pass, like AI and even just the way you're communicating with your customers, and even customers wanting AI to be part of what you sell, even if they don't fully understand it, they want to know that you're ahead of the curve on that. How are you guys, like, what are your business priorities right now and over the next like year to stay relevant? Like, what are you guys thinking about what the future of your business is, and how do you plan on continuously expanding it?
We generally speaking kind of expand pretty slowly. We're kind of like stay into the boutique realm, and how that being said, I think right now for us, at least for myself, I've been doing local SEO for quite some time, and we're somewhat less impacted than say some of these other like affiliate sites, or like you have these core updates that like we need maps and we need certain things, and it's just we're less affected. So I'm personally kind of a little excited to like have the game change for these other people. I feel like it's becoming a little bit more challenging. It's more off page, and so because there's a lot of marketing agencies out there, right? So like, and from again, our clientele is not very tech savvy. Andrew's clientele is probably very different than mine, right? Like a lot more educated, has probably very specific KPIs they need to hit. They know how to look at them. Ours are just not like that. And so they can get confused. They can not be able to distinguish the difference. So I'm trying to, and again, we need to get found in AI search now, which is really important for us. And so I'm seeing this as actually a potential opportunity to take that next step, differentiate ourselves, and accomplish certain things that, in my opinion, some other agencies, that was hard to distinguish the difference between someone who is doing things and who isn't. And so that that's where we're at, and that's what we're trying to lead into specific to AI search. And Andrew's tool example, I think, is a great example of how to maybe get better, quicker, more efficient workflows. And I think that obviously is going to impact everyone, and then everyone has like a lot of. We don't work with Figma as an example, but like we keep evaluating that in terms of internal efficiency processes.
Yeah, I would just say for us, we had a really good year in 2025. And it was largely revolving around really focusing on working with good people, like working with the right kinds of companies that like view us as partners and buy into partnership and strategic relationships, and then being in person Like we're a remote company, but we really invested in the relationships. We bought plane tickets and put our teams in the field, and made relationships that were both like, meaningful for business, but also just like meaningful for life, just like good friends and relationships that I think we will want to maintain regardless of their, financial value. And I think that that kind of mentality was really effective. So we're going to do that again. We're going to do it more. We're going to put our brand out a bunch more. We're going to have some more marketing this year. But yeah, I think we're poised for we're excited for 2026. It's going to be a good year.
Do either of you see the definition of success changing for your customers in 2026? Do you think that your customers' view of what a successful agency is has changed with the adoption of AI for so many?
I wouldn't say AI on my side. Like I would say it is more interest rates. So like for us, if we're like we work with a lot of companies that are like raising a lot of money, basically. And if the interest rates are high, then money is expensive. And as a result, then the metrics that are important for their agency are all super intensely revenue based. Like need to increase efficiency by 40% on pipeline, or like, we don't get to raise our next round or something like that. When the interest rates are low, it's like money is everywhere. And so people are like, who needs revenue? Just like get me clicks, like get me people to visit my site. Like I want as many new users as I can get for my product. They're not going to pay anything either. And like, we're all just trying to like get market position, while we can have cheap money. And so I would say for us, we kind of like, we watched like the emerging cloud index stock, ticker. And it's basically for the entire last year has been like flat. So people are just kind of like waiting to see kind of what happens. I would say, and that's kind of how they define their agency success.
Jeff, I'm going to give you a plug here because I think that one thing we've seen with local is that it seems like everyone wanted traffic. Like traffic was the determination of success for a long time in SEO, right? Like whether you had a keyword ranking on page one and you were driving website traffic. It felt like over the past year or so, we've seen a big push away from traffic and into more revenue where they can track whether or not you're generating actual opportunities. Just because traffic is down and down from like a organic SEO perspective, but AIs are now funneling people to the business where they're still converting revenue. Have you seen that trend for you guys? Like, what are you doing to try to make sure that your customers are tracking the right information for success this next year?
Yeah. One of our core KPIs for them is phone calls. Phone calls drives ultimately leads and revenue. So that's one of our core KPIs that we track. We're definitely seeing organic in general being down where direct is going up. There's a lot of direct / none that's like going up in the equivalent that organic is going down. So we're seeing some of that. I think our clientele is a little cautiously dipping their toe into what the level of correct investment is. They understand it's coming. They understand that it might be a little early. So some people are good at being early adopters and trying to get ahead of the curve. While restoration is very niche specific, we are in a very high dollar ticket price item. So like lawyers is a high ticket price for like PPC and so forth. So we do have a really good clientele when it comes to being able to spend money to make sure that they get found. So that's a good benefit for our vertical. There's been a lot of private, and VC money coming in and scooping up a lot of these companies, and people coming into this industry, finding out kind of like the margins and so forth. But I'd say from our clientele, it's kind of been like a cautiously approach, cautiously like knowing it's going to get there. So like, what's the right number? And so obviously they're leaning on us to provide that guidance. And because I didn't sell anything for the last 12 plus months, right? Like, because I haven't said anything, I haven't sold quote unquote snake oil, or I haven't made up some sort of other thing. Now, when I'm talking to them and that we have a potentially legitimate strategy, or at least forward-looking strategy, they are, I think, taking what we're telling them, pretty serious. And we're seeing actually a big increase in our client upsells, just our existing clients, and upsells as well with that.
Okay, I have one quick question for each of you because we're just about out of time for the podcast recording. with and I like that you said you didn't like sell snake oil, because I think that's an interesting perspective of like how people are selling AEO and GEO right now. So I'm curious, guys, like from the standpoint of like the traffic's been declining from an organic standpoint, but it's still generating revenue through like direct like LLM overviews. Are you telling your customer that they need to be moving their budget into GEO, or do you stand by like the SEO budget is the GEO budget? Do you feel them as different marketing budgets, or do you think they're the same?
Such a good question. I think it depends on what kind of retainer we have. We have some legacy clients that the effort and level to do some of this off-page stuff, not only is it more resource and driven, and it also is different personnel. Like someone running a PR branding campaign for me is not someone who's doing on-page, content strategy and analysis. So the reality is that like unless I've got a large enough retainer where I can move some of those funds from one person to the next, I'm actually bringing in different people to execute these things, right? Someone executing a user-generated content engagement strategy, getting into threads and forums, is a different person. So I'm actually treating it right now as like, let's stack these things on top of each other because our retainers are already really affordable. We already provide tremendous ROI. And I have got to bring in other people, and that's how we're approaching that kind of add-on and inclusion.
Okay. Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, in my world, it would make more sense if everyone just had a pipeline budget as opposed to like a SEO, AEO, paid media, email marketing, organic social media, etc. Like at the end of the day, what people want, and they want customers. Like they want people coming in, qualified customers who are going to pay real money. And I don't think anyone really cares where they're coming from. And so like probably the best practice is a channel mix that includes investments in the biggest areas of opportunity wherever they are. And I think there's a lot of, AEO, GEO provides a lot of new opportunities because of like the way that people are interacting with the content, like Jeff mentioned earlier, is just different. Like crawlers are different, like the interactions are different. Like we see like FAQs, for example, becoming a super important thing on a website now that like were not as important in Google era. Like having your questions framed the way that the prompts would be framed is like a pretty good way of doing it. So I think there's a ton of areas of opportunity, but I would usually frame it as like, what is your goal, and let's optimize towards the goal. And my last comment on that is like there's a bunch of dimensions. Like time is a thing. SEO is a great investment for a medium to long time horizon. If you're planning on being in business for more than a year, you should spend money on SEO, GEO, get yourself optimized. If you need to raise money before the end of the year, you're done. SEO is not for you. Like spend money on ads, spend money on emails, like gotta go. So there's a lot of dimensions about how to choose your budget. And so for us, I would say ideally look at it all as part of the same pie.
I love that from the side of like local and national, like and more national. Like you have a point system for national, you have to distribute the points wherever they're going to be the most effective for your customer. And local, they don't have the points necessarily to distribute across all channels. You're prioritizing like the few that you have access to.
Yeah, and I like Andrew's point about I was just going to say, like, I like Andrew's point about like optimize or like having a pipeline budget, right? And I think right now, at least from our perspective, like we're in the transition phase of like how important some of this AI search is. So right now it's somewhat maybe separated in terms of like a budget or a campaign, but ultimately it will, now that we understand that like AI is going to be here, it ultimately will turn into just here's our search budget, right? And it would eventually be combined because we won't be able to do one without the other, and we'll have to combine them at some point.
Guys, I really appreciate your time. We're out of time for the podcast recording. I'm going to end it here just for the sake of getting you guys onto your next calls. But Andrew and Jeff, thank you guys so much for being part of SEO On Air. We'll see you next time.